The world can be quite complex. It's hard to make sense of all the information that's being thrown at us constantly. But do you know what can help us make sense of this crazy world? Mental models. Mental models are in essence frameworks that we can use to make sense of the world around us. It helps to simplify concepts and thus allow us to process what we're seeing so we can understand it, process it, and act on it. So in that spirit, let me share with you 12 mental models for your tool belt so you can supercharge your wealth building. The number one mental model to supercharge your wealth building: inversion. Inversion is all about thinking things in reverse. When you run into a roadblock, try approaching it from the opposite direction or view it from the opposite point of view. For example, let's say that you have a problem of spending too much. The common approach to such problem is to cut back on your expenses. You go through your expenses and try to identify what to remove, what to cut. However, this can be exhausting and stressful. Instead, you invert your approach.
Because I was inverted.
Instead of approaching your expenses with the lens of what you need to cut, you approach it with what you want to keep. What do you love spending money on? What expenses bring you the greatest joy? You identify what you want to keep, which allows you to see what is not as important. Not only is this less stressful, it can actually be enjoyable. Nobody likes cutting back, but we all like to spend more on the things that we love. So next time you run into a hard patch with a problem, try to invert your approach or your point of view. Ask yourself, what happens if I approach it from the opposite end? Number two mental model to supercharge your wealth building: inertia. Inertia is a fundamental physics principle of motion. An object in motion with a certain vector wants to continue moving in that direction. If we want to slow it down, change its direction, or stop its motion full, it requires external force. And stronger the inertial motion, stronger the external force required to make the change. We might have a sudden desire to change our lifestyle habits so we can reduce our expenses. However, if we have a long habit of high expenses, changing is really hard to do. There's so much inertia behind the expensive lifestyle, most often it requires dramatic life events to force us to change. A loss of a job, bankruptcy, or even a life-threatening event. It's easy to think that we can quickly change our habits, as long as we have the will and the desire. However, there are principles that show us that if we're already heading in one direction, it's not as easy as it seems. If we have lived a certain lifestyle over a long period of time, they become so ingrained in us that it becomes almost impossible to change course. So be wary and careful with any change. Upgrading our car to the next tier vehicle may not seem that harmless right now, but over the long run, it becomes a habit, and soon a lifestyle that becomes hard to untether ourselves from. Before we move on, let's take a quick moment to talk about our phone bills. If you've been paying too much for phone service and have been on the market for an affordable wireless phone plan, I highly recommend you check out Mint Mobile, who I'm partnering with for today's video. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data, given they're built in the nation's largest 5G network. And how are they able to do this? It's because Mint Mobile's model is based on direct online selling. They don't have any costly retail stores and salespeople. Thus, they're able to pass those savings directly to you, the customer. No need to pay more than you have to access the same network. They also offer a modern family plan that lets you set up super affordable family plans with as little as 2 lines. So if you want to start saving money on your phone bills today, use my link. Try mintmobile.com/financialtortoise or scan my QR code. It's not only a great way to save money on recurring expenses, but an easy way to support this channel as well. Alright, with that said, let's get back to the video. The number 3 mental model to supercharge your wealth building: the Pareto Principle, or sometimes called the 80-20 rule. The Pareto Principle is the idea that a very small number of key variables have a greater impact on the final result than all other variables combined. It's named after the economist Vilfredo Pareto, who in the early 20th century noticed that 20% of people own 80% of the land in Italy. And he saw that this pattern was visible in both the social as well as the natural world. 20% of pods in his garden produce 80% of his peace. 20% of companies produce 80% of market returns. 20% of natural disasters produce 80% of all destruction. And when we look at our spending, this is probably true as well. A small number of line items account for the majority of our expenses, most often our homes, our cars, or our expensive habits. We can spend all our energy and time trying to cut back on our $7 coffee and $12 subscriptions. However, if we don't have our big expenses under control, they're all futile efforts. What is the point of trying to save $20 on toilet paper when we're spending 50% of our paycheck on home mortgage, or $2,000 a month on car payment? Instead of spending our energy on the 80% that produces 20% of the results, we need to identify the 20% that produces 80% of the results. The big fish, the big levers. The number 4 mental model to supercharge your wealth building: redundancy. In engineering terms, redundancy is an intentional duplication of critical components or functions of a system with the goal of increasing reliability of the system. In layman's term, backup. Things are designed in such a way that if one part of the system fails, the system as a whole will still be able to function due to the presence of backup components. In suspension bridge, structural engineers install numerous cables as a form of redundancy. In hospitals, the facility manager installs backup generators so life-saving equipment can be kept on and functioning during power outages and natural disasters. On the plane, there's a backup system to extend the landing gear if the primary hydraulic system fails to perform. In the same way, we want to think about building redundancies in our financial plan. If we're a one-income household, could we add redundancies by generating additional sources of income? When it comes to investing, if a good chunk of our money is invested in the stock market, should we look at other asset classes to add more diversity to our holdings? Maybe the international market or real estate? Or maybe even private businesses? Bottom line, just as engineers don't expect things to work out perfectly, we shouldn't either. Add redundancies to crucial areas of our lives. In the spirit of redundancy, I created a free one-page companion PDF guide to go along with this video. Pretty much everything I'm covering here in a simple to digest, one-page format for all you nerds out there. I know how much some of you guys like to see things visually in addition to hearing them. Redundancy and information. So if you'd like a free copy of this PDF, please go to the link I'll have in the description below. The number 5 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. The point of diminishing returns. The point of diminishing returns is a concept used in the field of microeconomics and refers to a point after the optimal level of capacity is reached, where every added unit of production results in a smaller increase in output. Think of happiness in relation to salary increase. When you're living hand to mouth, every increase in your salary is directly correlated to additional happiness. Before you had trouble putting a roof over your head, but now you can sleep in peace. A huge jump in happiness. But at a certain point, you hit a diminishing point of return. Additional increase in your salary doesn't lead to an equal increase in happiness. It tapers off because after all the basics are met, additional dollar doesn't create additional happiness. Some studies have shown that after about $75,000 a year, your happiness somewhat plateaus even if your income increases. A point of diminishing returns. I've also seen this with career trajectories. With most careers, there's a point of diminishing returns where additional input, hard work and investment doesn't lead to the same level of increase in salary. There's a natural upper cap to certain roles at certain companies. Instead of plowing through the same job with the same dedication and hoping that your circumstances will change, it's best to recognize that you hit a point of diminishing returns and look for a career shift, a different company, and maybe even a different industry if you want to continually increase your salary. Number 6 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a principle often attributed to a 14th century friar, William of Occam, and it essentially says that if you have two competing ideas to explain the same phenomenon, you should prefer the simpler one. Essentially, simple over complex. Not only is simple easier to understand and explain, but it's easier to execute, and a lot of times produce even better results. In the investing world, we love complex things. We love financial products with 18 syllables and 23 moving parts. We think more complex a tool, the more money it will make us. Why have a simple exchange-traded fund when you can have leveraged and inverse exchange-traded funds? Why buy simple commodities when you can have structured commodities future contracts? But just as Occam's razor warns us, the simplest option, the one that we can actually understand, should be preferable to the one that is more complex and harder to understand. Instead of trying to spend our precious time trying to understand how these complex financial products work and if they can make more money for us, make decision confidently by selecting the product that has the fewest moving parts. Instead of following an investing strategy that has 49 different funds doing 49 different things, choose a simple one fund strategy and stick with it for a long period of time. Instead of stacking whole life insurance and variable annuities to mitigate risk, just buy a simple term life insurance over a specific period of time. Bottom line, when faced with the decision, choose simple over complex. Number 7 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Regression to the mean. In a normal distribution system, long deviations from the average will tend to return to that average with increasing number of observations. For example, let's say that you were to flip a coin 100 times and you record your results. For some whatever reason, your first 10 flips results with 10 hits, a very rare event. Now, some might say that you're on a lucky streak and you can continue to flip heads. However, what regression to the mean will state is that the next 10 flips will likely be not heads. And over the long run, all your flips will average out so that by the time you do 100 flips, the number of heads will likely be 50. Half the total flips. Regression to the mean. When we look at the investment market, we might notice that a group of companies or an asset class might be doing extremely well in relation to the market. They have outperformed the index by 20%. Thus, what many people and even professionals do is expect that this streak will continue in the future and buy more of that company or the asset class. However, based on the regression to the mean, what will happen is that over the long run, the performance of these companies in the asset class will return to its long-term average. Yes, it did experience a period of extreme returns. However, that is similar to me flipping heads 10 times in a row. Just because I did that doesn't mean I'll do that for the next 10 flips. The chances are that my flips will average out to 50-50 in the long run. So next time you read an article about how a group of companies are outperforming the market, be careful not to get swept up by the belief that it will continue in the future. Number 8 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the cost of either time, effort, or opportunity that someone gives up when they make one choice as opposed to another. You lost that opportunity to hang out with Sally when you chose to go to the movies with Bob. You lost that opportunity to invest your money in the market when you chose to spend it on a brand new car. Bottom line, we live in a world of trade-offs. When we choose to spend our resources on one thing, we're removing that opportunity to spend that resource on something else. When you spend all your time cutting coupons and agonizing over the $7 coffee, you're missing the opportunity to grow your career capital or financial knowledge that can earn you additional $70,000 in the long run. Number 9 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Arbitrage. Given two markets selling identical products, an arbitrage exists if a product can be bought in one market and sold at a different market for a profit. I sell handbags online, and I noticed that while the same handbag can be sold for $100 on eBay, it's being sold for $80 on Facebook. I can take advantage of this arbitrage and make a $20 profit by buying them on Facebook and selling it on eBay. You can also practice geo-arbitrage, which involves essentially moving to a place with a lower cost of living while keeping the same level of income. If you work in a job where the salary doesn't fluctuate too much based on where you live, you can save more and invest more if you were to move to a lower cost of living area. For example, while the median rent price in LA is around $2,800, the median rent price in Indianapolis, Indiana is $1,400, essentially half. If your income remains the same or drops by only 10 to 20% by moving to Indianapolis, you're essentially taking advantage of geo-arbitrage. Number 10 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Reciprocity. In physics, reciprocity is Newton's third law, which states that for every force exerted by object A on object B, there is an equal but opposite force exerted by object B on object A. And like physics, we humans tend to act in a similar way. If you want to get good at networking, you want to understand this concept of reciprocity. Most often, people jump into networking or relationship building with the perspective of what can I get out of this interaction? Can this person connect me with someone more important? Can this person help me with my business? Will this person buy my product? But authentic human relationships don't work this way. When you approach people with the mindset of taking, they will retract. So approach people with a win-win proposal by giving first without expecting anything in return. Chances are that if you give first, most people will want to reciprocate. This is the best way to network and build healthy relationships over a long period of time. Number 11 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Compounding. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. Compounding is a powerful concept that involves earning returns on both your original investment and on returns you received previously. A typical compounding growth looks like an exponential growth curve. It's not linear, which makes it one of the most powerful concepts in both money and life. This concept of compounding is the reason why so many personal finance gurus recommend people invest early. Because when you do, you're letting the time do the heavy lifting of multiplying your net worth. Number 12 mental model to supercharge your wealth building. Leverage. Since the start of civilization, many of the engineering marvels of the world were accomplished with applied leverage. Give me a lever long enough and I shall move the world. How do you lift a 2-ton car? By leveraging the mechanical car jack. How do you pull out a nail stuck in the wall? By leveraging the hammer claw. With a small amount of input force, we're able to produce a greater output force through leverage. In the personal finance world, the most common use of leverage is to use borrowed money to multiply your impact, whether you're investing it or purchasing something. Now, leverage used in the right way can be a smart use of capital. Leverage is what allows us to buy a home we can't afford today and to earn a degree that is out of our financial reach. However, we have to be careful. Just as a hammer claw not positioned right when pulling a nail out can bounce back and break one of our teeth, leverage can do a similar damage. Most often, actually worse. Understand its power and harness it when you can, but be wary. Thank you guys for watching. In the spirit of concepts and principles, if you find this type of video interesting, please check out my video on 10 most powerful principles for life and money success here. Until next time, all the best.